All right, good afternoon. We're going to go ahead and get started. Excuse me. Good afternoon. My name is Harold Brown. I'm with the KnowledgeWorks Foundation based in Cincinnati, Ohio. On behalf of my colleagues here who are going to be speaking with you, welcome all of you to this briefing. Thank you for all the NACEP folks that are here that have had a long day, a very productive day for coming, as well as folks from our congressional offices. We're very pleased that you're here, and we hope during this time that you will gain a really deep understanding of what we believe is one of the most compelling opportunities to advance educational outcomes that's currently available to us. So I'm going to start with a couple of quick overview remarks, and then we're going to hear briefly from these other folks that are in the field, and they're going to share some unique aspects of their work. And you'll, I hope, see that we're all working for the same ends and the same goals, really trying to improve the educational outcomes of some of our most vulnerable and at-risk young people. So I would just say a little bit about the challenge, about the solutions that we're proposing, about some of the barriers, and then some of the needs, just to kind of frame a couple of thoughts to start us off. And by the way, at the end, we will try to have a dialogue and entertain any feedback, any questions that you may have, any comments that you'd like to contribute to the dialogue. So the challenge is clear, right, that there's a need across the country for a far more educated population and workforce, a far more credentialed workforce, if you will. And that combined with the persistently low college degree completion rates across the country, and especially amongst our first-generation low-income and minority students. And that problem, by the way, is especially poignant because of what's happening demographically, right? That in a few decades, we're going to have a majority-minority demographic shift. So if those are the students who are not completing college and not coming out credentialed, we're really going to have an even more exacerbated problem. And then, of course, at the front end of that problem are that too many students are entering higher ed unprepared and leaving without a degree or a credential, but with tons of debt. So you put all that together, we have an enormous challenge before us. But the good news is that, as you'll hear from my colleagues as well as some of the work that we're doing, is that there are some solutions. There is great progress being made in a number of places to deal with those challenges. And what we're talking about, of course, are the variety of early college initiatives that are designed to better prepare students for success in college. And these are deep partnerships between K-12 and higher education and other partners, too, that are welcome at the table. And they range from concurrent or dual enrollment programs all the way to more immersive experiences such as early college high schools. But the idea is that high school students, and particularly those who are first-generation low income and what we would consider to be either underrepresented or at risk, that those students have a clear pathway to earn significant college credit, even an associate's degree, while they're in high school. And so, for example, in our own work in Ohio, about a third of the students in 9 early college high schools are graduating in 4 years of high school with an associate's degree and up to 60 hours of college credit, fully paid for and ready to persist, in many cases, to a 4-year degree. And the data is mind-blowing. We have some data of our own, but increasingly we're collecting this data through the National Clearinghouse, and all across the country, well over 300 early college high schools, the data is fairly consistent, that these students are graduating high school first at far, far higher rates, and ultimately their college completion rates, their degree completion rates, dramatically exceed their peers who are not in early college high schools. And so again, I repeat, this may be the most compelling strategy I think that's available to us to really cause these young people, these at-risk people who are not even thinking about college or not even being encouraged to go to college, to go all the way through to degree completion. But there are barriers to scaling this work. First and foremost are the low expectations that too many people have for this target group of students. And I've always believed that people are only really going to go as far in their efforts as they really believe about the students that they're serving. You can say it, you can say we have high expectations, but if in the course of dealing with students you don't demonstrate that, then it's really just lip service. Also, obviously, there are financial issues here. We have a number of places around the country that want to make this happen, but don't have the financial resources to get started, to get the help that they need to frame this or to start up a new early college high school. and also paying for college tuition. We, in most states, have tried to figure this out, but there's really not, in most places, a systemic solution. How do you pay for the college courses that the students are going to be taking? And we know that there's some legislation being considered here that could help with that for those Pell-eligible students. And like any other major initiative that requires transformative change, we need leaders and we need champions, from the halls of Congress all the way to our local sites. So we encourage everyone in the room to really understand deeply this work and be advocates for it, no matter where you live and no matter what kind of work you're doing that's related to this. And finally, around needs, we do need funding, but we need encouragement for our K-12 districts and our higher ed institutions to work together. They need often to be incentivized, to be encouraged, to come together from their silos, if you will, and make this work happen. We have great examples of this working, and it's happening in lots of places across the country. We need more demonstration sites, but we need to encourage folks to move in this direction. So that gives just a very broad, general sense of the thrust of what we're doing. In my career in education, I can't remember a more dramatic moment than at the Dayton Early College Academy in Ohio, where when I started off this work, and these students were walking through the doors of that place for the first time saying, "Where am I? Why am I here? My mother made me come, and I'm in college. What is this all about?" And then 4 years later, watching those same students walk across the stage, about a third of them with an associate's degree, many others with scholarships, just as proud as they could be. Their parents were just crying and wailing in the audience because they couldn't believe how far their youngster had come. And it was really about setting up those high expectations and clear pathways for those students to complete that effort. And so it's the most gratifying work I've seen in my educational career. I just hope we can continue to build on that and scale it up all across the country. So we're now going to hear from, and each person, we're going to read bios, but each person can tell you a little bit about their work. But let's hear from Noreen Light, who is the Associate Director of Academic Affairs and Policy at the Washington State Student Achievement Council. Noreen?
Thank you. I think it was on already. Yes? Okay. So, yes, the Washington State, the other Washington. Washington Student Achievement Council. And I want to tell you a little bit of the good news, bad news, first of all, of what's happening in Washington. And then I'm going to tell you a little bit about the context so you can see how we got to where we are today. Good news is, last year, about 2,000 high school students graduated high school and already had an associate's degree. That's really good news. Bad news is, we're still finding that the people who are able to benefit from dual credit in our state are, for the most part, the folks who traditionally have gone on to college anyway. So we have a lot of work to do in increasing the number of underrepresented minority students and low-income students who are entering into dual credit programs and then transitioning into college. So that was a real focus for us in Washington. So let me tell you a little bit about the Washington Student Achievement Council so I can set the context for what our role is in dual credit in Washington. The Washington Student Achievement Council is only 3 years old, so it's a very new organization. And when Governor Gregoire was in office, she wanted a P20 council. Well, we didn't get a P20 council. We got the next closest thing in the Washington Student Achievement Council. It doesn't include early learning, but it does include representatives from the other educational sectors. So we have the deputy director of the K-12 system, independent colleges of Washington, the public baccalaureates, the community and technical college system, and then we have 5 community members on our council. Our council chair is actually also the CEO of the Chamber of Commerce for the City of Seattle. So you can see that we have a really broad representation there. So when our council agrees to something, the people from those agencies all know that, oh, okay, our agency is already in on this. So that's very cool. So I was really excited to come to work for the Student Achievement Council, and my role there is working on the K-12 higher education connection. So we're all about looking at the full spectrum of education, and of course, dual credit is a big part of that. I don't really need to tell you that. So the Student Achievement Council was charged with creating a 10-year roadmap for for education for Washington State. And one of the key pieces of that roadmap was dual credit. It was clearly identified in the 10-year plan. Not only that, but then the council created a 2-year strategic action plan So we said, okay, what's most important? What are we going to do in the first 2 years of implementing this roadmap? And the second priority on that immediate 2-year plan was improve dual credit. So it's second only to fully fund state need grant in the state of Washington was improve dual credit, and improving meaning expanding opportunities for more students. In particular, as I mentioned, underrepresented minority students, low-income students, but we also have, most people think of Seattle as being this really urban, state of Washington as being Seattle. Very urban area, right? If you go anywhere outside of Seattle, you can see a lot of rural area. And so we're looking at those rural schools, districts that receive small school funding, schools that are more than 20 or 30 miles from a college, where students don't have the opportunity to really see a college as much. So we want to make sure that we include those students in opportunities. The Student Achievement Council established 2 educational attainment goals, which were adopted unanimously by our legislature last year. 100% of our working adult population aged 25 to 44 would have high school diploma or GED, 100%, everybody. And 70% or more would have some type of post-secondary credential. And in looking at those attainment goals, we knew that we couldn't get there without getting more people into college. We know we have to get them through college, but we also have to get more people into college. And we know, and all of you know, most of you, that students who even take one college credit course in high school are more likely to continue on to college and to complete college. So we have the attainment goals that everyone in the state has agreed to. And we know this high school to higher ed transition is critical. But what it takes is the collaboration. And that's one of the pieces that the Student Achievement Council was created to really lead, is facilitating that collaboration across the sectors. We have quite a few examples of how that's happened in Washington State. We've been working together around the implementation of the Common Core State Standards and the Smarter Balance Assessments. And through that, we've had our high school teachers and our college faculty work together to create 12th grade transition courses. So for students who are scoring below college ready at the 11th grade Smarter Balance Assessment, there are specific transition courses for those folks. For those who are scoring a 3 or a 4, which would be considered college ready, we're strongly advising them into dual credit programs for their senior year. So we're also looking at the Smarter Balance scores as early as 8th grade and saying if you score a 3 or a 4 in your 8th grade Smarter Balance assessment, you need to be putting dual credit courses into your high school and beyond plan. Now, the high school and beyond plan is something that the State Board of Education is requiring for graduation. So every student has to have one. So by using those scores as early as 8th grade and getting people thinking about dual credit as part of your high school pathway, we're already getting them started in that. So there's a lot of the high school higher ed collaboration already working there. We also pulled together a statewide work group that included folks from all of our different sectors to come together and make some recommendations to the Student Achievement Council on how to implement this plan of improving dual credit. That work group, and there are a couple folks here, Karen Landry's here, and Jessica Dempsey's here, that work group made recommendations to the council, which they in turn validated and created draft legislative language, which was moved forward to the governor's office. It became governor-requested legislation and has passed both the House and the Senate. And it's actually, I've been checking all day to see if it's scheduled for signing, so I'm tentatively telling you that I think it's going to be signed tomorrow, maybe next week, but it's close. We're really excited about that because this really was a cross-sector development of what is it that we want to do in our state. And again, it comes to funding for those low-income and rural districts, very clear funding, especially for college and high school, what we call college and high school, which is concurrent enrollment. So students can take college courses at their high school and not have to leave the high school. And another significant piece of connecting work that's already been done is that we have already developed a list of courses from which students can take up to 45 credits and know that there's guarantee that they will transfer to any of the public institutions in Washington State. So if we take those that list of the Washington 45 and we take our open course library project, which has developed open education resources and free or $30 or less textbooks for every one of those courses, and say, why don't we focus on those in our dual credit courses? We know they transfer, not as elective credit, but as general education credit. We know we can get low-cost textbooks for them. We know there are a lot of shared resources. So we're just trying to connect all of these different pieces around the state, all the good work that's already happening, and make it into really the best bang for the buck for our students. I think I probably took my 5 minutes, so I'll let other folks move on, and then if anyone has questions for me, we can come back to that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Noreen. Next on the list is Monique Peterkin, who is an alum of the Bard High School Early College in Manhattan, New York. Monique?
Hello, yeah, mine is on. As he said, my name is Monique. I graduated from BSEC in Manhattan, and I guess I can attest to what she was talking about in terms of low-income students who are having access to these programs. I know I myself, I am from Brooklyn, New York, and in particular, I'm from Brownsville, and it isn't the best neighborhood. My junior high school, usually students from my neighborhood will go to the junior high school that's in that neighborhood. And what I realized going to my junior high school is that I didn't receive a great education. I was telling some of the people here today that our history textbooks were still from the 70s. And so a lot of the things that we had to learn post that period, we used supplemental materials. And so it was really difficult for us to learn certain things. As far as writing, the most significant thing that we were taught was to write a book report. And so I think to the administrators in our school, the best thing was that we were actually reading books. And so book reports were good enough. And so when I passed the test to get into Bard, and I actually went there, and 4 weeks in I had to write my first paper, I got a C. And when I spoke to my professor about it, he said it was because I didn't write a great analysis. And at that time, I didn't even know what an analysis was. And so I spoke with him, and from that time on, I worked with him, and he taught me how to develop these things. He taught me what analysis was, how to connect points. Another problem for us was science, because in my school, it was really difficult to find a science teacher who was certified, but who could actually stand being there. And so we would have a different science teacher every 2 weeks. And so when I went to Bard, I went from not knowing anything about science to taking chemistry and physics in 1 year. And so it was really difficult, and it was hard work, and it was the first time in my life that I ever seen C's, but it helped me to also understand that I wasn't receiving the education that I needed. And when I was put into the environment where I was with a whole bunch of different students, not just students that were just like me from my neighborhood, but students who I went to really great private schools, who had gotten really great education, I realized that I was lacking in certain respects. And so the teachers were really welcoming. They worked with us. They had office hours. But on top of those office hours, they would stay behind with me and with a lot of other students to make sure that we received all of that, like the best education that we possibly could. And slowly but surely, our grades began to increase. I graduated and I received my associate's degree at 18. I went to Ithaca College in upstate New York, and I graduated from there in 2.5 years at 20. And now I just finished my first year of law school. So I'm officially a 2L. I just took my last final on Monday. That was great. I'm 21 years old, so I think that what Bard really did for me was give me a great education. It gave me an experience that I don't think I would have had I not gone to that school. I wouldn't have realized that I had gaps in my education. And a lot of my friends that went to schools that are similar to what I went to and who went on to go to high schools that were still in our neighborhood, when they went to college, that's when they found those gaps in their education. And for them, it was too late because they had to learn in college how to write this analysis, and it ended up impacting them negatively and impacting their grades there, and really, I believe, hurting their chances at, graduate institutions that they could have gone to, because they had to begin to improve their grades when they got there. And so I believe the significance of an early college program to me was that I was 14 years old. And for me, being 14 years old and learning to write an analysis was baffling and was too late. But for a lot of other people, they're 18 years old trying to learn these different things, and it really impacts them when they're trying to go into the job market and when they're trying to get these graduate degrees. And so I really think that an early college program speaks to the amount of work that any student that you put in that environment, they can learn from that environment, and it can really better them and better the work that they're able to do when they get into the real world.
Thank you. Thank you, Monique. Nothing ever tops hearing from students, or in this case, recent students. Next would be Dr. John Weinstein, who is the principal of Bard High School Early College in Newark, New Jersey.
Hey, thank you. Usually I get to go before the former student, and I have to say I think I like that order better because I don't think I can really top that. And as an educator, I don't want to top what the students do, but I guess I'll just go in this position nevertheless. I was a founding faculty member of the school that Monique went to, and then I worked at a private early college in the Bard system, Simon's Rock, after that for 9 years, and then I was invited to become one of the founding leaders and then ultimately principal of Bard High School Early College in Newark. We opened in 2011, so our first initial 9th grade students are about to graduate this year. So at the end of June, we will be giving out to our original group of students, which started somewhere in the 90s, and we've had some moving in and out of district and things like that. We'll give out probably about 66 to 68 high school diplomas, and of those students, approximately 50 will earn associate's degrees. And this is in a city where the high school graduation rate hovers around 50%. So, and this is with our first group. So we're really excited. I do have pictures of my original kids on our new brochure, which I have lots of copies if you'd like to take one later. I'm causing buzzing. So, I think that's kind of the quick version, of our starting and our success. I think some of the key things about the Bart approach are the way we have a hybrid faculty who teach both high school and college classes, and the second piece is our focus on using challenging college material as the means towards engagement. So those are the two things I'm going to use the rest of my 5 minutes for. We have, from very early on, had a faculty that does work in both areas. Often in education, there's always the blame game. The 3rd grade teacher says, I don't know what your 2nd grade teacher taught you about math, but they're an idiot, right? And this goes on and on and on and on. For us, because we have the same faculty who are both college faculty credentialed and also certified to teach in public high school in whatever state we're in, you're teaching 9th grade English, and then you have them for their year 1 college seminar 2 years later, so you can't blame the person who taught them last time because it was yourself, right? And I think this helps us get away from this blame game that's so very popular in education, because the easiest way to account for student efficiency is to blame somebody else for it, right? This really forces us to take ownership of it. We're preparing our own students for college, and we have to figure out what that's going to be and make sure that it happens. I do think this also allows for a really great synergy. I do think that when we started, I think the idea was, high school is going to learn a lot from college teaching. While that's true, we've also learned that college learned a lot from high school teaching. And I think that I'm really trying to now avoid saying, I use this high school teaching practice or I use this college teaching practice. I might say, I'm using a teaching practice that's been more frequently associated with 8th grade pedagogy or something like that. But it's not an inherent, no teaching strategy is inherent to one age. To some degree, we're all kindergartners our whole lives in some ways, right? And sometimes you still like when a little game goes on, even in a college class. So I think being really open to this has enabled this dual enrollment situation to really foster this synergy. I mean, our students are gaining, I think, the best of all worlds. Another piece that's really key is insisting on using the challenging material to engage the students. And this does start at the high school level, but then continues on in the early college level. When we came into Newark, which has a very different demographic than New York City, I think Monique talked about coming from a school that didn't really have such a rigorous approach and being with students from all different ranges. In Newark, a lot of our schools have not really had a very rigorous approach in the past. And, and there's been a lot of sense of, well, this is what the students can handle. I think when we first came into Newark, I got a lot of people saying, well, do you really think that our students can do this? And I'm a Chinese teacher, that's my subject area. And we teach Chinese in all of our schools in the Bard network. And one of the Newark stakeholders we met early on said, do you really need to teach that? It's not like any of our kids are going to be international bankers or anything. I thought that or anything was a particularly nice touch in that demeaning comment. And I said, well, we'll just go ahead and do that. And, 3 years later, we had our first student win one of the State Department-funded summer scholarships for high school students to go to China. So apparently, somebody's certainly going to be something, whether it's an international banker or not. I'm not sure. We also really use challenging materials. So I'm teaching the year one seminar right now for the students in the first year of their college program, where we teach Constitution and Declaration of Independence against a background of Locke and Machiavelli and Descartes and all these thinkers. And we did have a Shakespeare play in there, and one of the students said, this Shakespeare is so hard. For my presentation, why couldn't I be assigned something easy like Descartes? And if I'd said in 2011 we're going to have students in Newark saying, why can't I have the easy text like Descartes, right? It's really, and it's not saying this is something that's hard. So it's saying this is something that's important and interesting, and this is what we're going to be reading. And I do think that it really works. I often when a student isn't doing well, it's because they're not being challenged enough, or they can tell that you're giving them something that you think is kind of easy because you don't think they're very good, right? It's very easy to communicate low expectations, and low expectations that's a very wonderful self-fulfilling prophecy. If you have low expectations for young people, you can guarantee that they will precisely meet those low expectations. So we really go with a high expectations approach, and I think our statistics with our initial group really show that. It's people have said to me, oh, so that first class, they're graduating. Anyone getting that associate's degree? I say, well, 50 of them. It's really something that students have been able to do. These are not all the best and strongest students. It's a real range. We're not, because of the size of the city, at the selectivity level that our schools in New York had. So a lot of these students are kind of average Newark students in terms of the proficiency levels they brought in. We've always had about a third of the class who enters below grade level in reading and or math. So this is not just something for that one genius student in the group. You can really motivate a whole range of students through this and get them on that road to college. So that's what we're doing in Newark.
Thank you, Dr. Weinstein. Now we have Rachel Crew, who is a program associate with Jobs for the Future and an alumna of Florida's early college program. Rachel?
Hi, everyone. My name is Rachel. So I am much like Monique in that I graduated at 17 with my AA degree. So I left high school 2 years early. I did it at St. Petersburg College in Florida. And it's a little bit different than what the model that JFF and who partners with Bart and EdWorks and the Alliance and others. It's a little bit different than the early college high school model in that I left the high school campus after my sophomore year and went straight to the college campus and was kind of put in this scary environment and had to take 15 credit hours a semester in order to get it for free. So I graduated at 17, and then I went to the University of Central Florida. I got my bachelor's degree at 19 years old, and then I went to work for Senator Marco Rubio just up until October, and now I'm with JFF working on these policy issues for early college, and that's why it's really near and dear to my heart because it helped me and really gave me a jump start to my career. So JFF's early college model, it focuses on serving low-income and kids from underserved backgrounds. And so I'm just going to give you a couple statistics. So early college students are far more likely to graduate high school. 90% of early college students receive a diploma versus 78% of students nationally. Early college students are far more likely to earn substantial college credit in high school. 94% of early college students earn college credit in high school versus about 10% of students nationally. And why this is important and why this effort matters is because it's a huge investment in our students, especially with the reauthorization of ESCA and the Higher Ed Act coming up. These are programs that I think that we should stress to congressional staffers and members to invest in, because I'm a product of it, Monique is a product of it, and it's something that we can invest in the future, and the outcomes are there. And JFF especially is really big on the student information systems, and we've done the research, and it's proven that if you do earn college credit while in high school, that you're more likely to persist in college and get a degree or a credential.
Well said, Rachel. And last, but certainly not least, is Adam Lowe, who is the Executive Director of the National Alliance of Concurrent Enrollment Programs, and who also put together this opportunity. Adam?
Thank you very much, Harold. And the National Alliance of Concurrent Enrollment Partnerships is a professional membership organization representing 325 colleges and universities across the country, as well as 40 school districts and 20 partner state agencies that are all engaged in developing high-quality dual and concurrent enrollment programs. In addition to serving as a membership organization, we also provide a peer review accreditation process for concurrent enrollment programs to try to raise the level of quality and rigor in these programs to establish greater consistency in credit transfer and in quality assurance for these programs. I get to take a step back and not talk about the on-the-ground work and provide a little context with federal policy. Dual and concurrent enrollment already exists in federal statutes in 3 areas. It currently exists in the Perkins Act, so career and technical education programs, dual and concurrent enrollment is allowable use for Perkins funding, as well as a essential component of state plans. We have seen this be a remarkable transformation of career and technical education in the past few years as states and institutions and schools are looking to reinvent career and technical education for the 21st century jobs. That increasingly utilizing dual and concurrent enrollment coursework as that linchpin to course as students are proceeding on a college pathway directly into credentials or associate's degrees in career fields. The second area is in Gear Up, Gaining Early Awareness and Readiness. This is a partnership program from middle school through high school involving community partners and institutions of higher education as well, particularly focused on increasing the numbers of low-income students who are prepared for and transitioning to college. The third area where it exists in federal statute currently is critical foreign languages. This was put in place in 2008 in a time period when we were investing heavily and continue to invest in languages such as Mandarin, as well as Arabic and Farsi and Russian and other languages that are critical to our national security needs, in particular in the coming years. And so there are grants out there for partnerships of the K-12 system and the higher education system. And I think that's one of the continuing themes that you're hearing here is that what's critical about dual and concurrent enrollment is that it brings together these two otherwise disparate systems. And so any opportunity where the federal role in education is encouraging partnerships, dual and concurrent enrollment is a critical component of that and ought to be. So I wanted to talk a little bit about our collective goals and what we're seeing right now in the Elementary and Secondary Education Act reauthorization discussions. And so first on the House side, the Student Success Act of 2015 does include dual and concurrent enrollment in 3 different places. The first would be as a component of the local education agency plans for improving basic programs, the Title I programs. Secondly, as an allowable use for the proposed teacher grants for local education agencies, both the formula grants as well as the competitive grants. And thirdly, as an allowable activity for the proposed local academic flexible grants. These provisions were first introduced into the 2013 versions of the Student Success Act by Representative Heck from Nevada. Notably, Representative Heck was the only one in 2013 that passed through the committee with bipartisan support. And so we think that this is a critical component to any of the ESEA reauthorization conversations. Likewise, on the Senate side, the Every Child Achieves Act version that has come out of committee includes dual enrollment in 3 places. Again, in a component of state plans, in this case, state plans rather than local plans for the Title I Improving Basic Programs. As an allowable use for local teacher improvement grants under Title II, as well as a reporting element on annual state and local report cards. In addition, during the markup, we saw the Senator Franken introduce an amendment that passed committee to support accelerated learning programs. It renamed the Advanced Placement Incentive Program as the Accelerated Learning Incentive Program and opens that up to dual enrollment programs in early college high schools as well. It does not open up the Advanced Placement Examination Fee Program, and that's certainly an area that we'd like to have continued discussions about. So that's where we stand currently with the two bills that are moving through Congress right now. I did want to talk about some of the other areas in which we could see possible improvements to the current bills. And our goal throughout this is to create a positive, supportive environment for these programs so that states and local education agencies can utilize federal funds and are incentivized to deepen these partnerships to benefit more students with these quality college courses. And so one area is certainly to continue looking at areas within Title I and Title II, so supporting, leveraging post-secondary partnerships to support high school improvement that are served, particularly for high schools that serve large numbers of low-income students, as well as providing for quality professional development. This is one of the things that dual and concurrent enrollment is really successful at, is building deep, content-rich, discipline-specific professional development for teachers. We think that, again, as we've seen in some of the initial versions of the bills, some reporting elements for report cards, components of state and local plans for both improving basic programs and teacher improvement programs. Accountability systems is an area that we have seen a lot of growth in the states in the last few years, and so there are 11 states now that incorporate advanced coursework, including dual and concurrent enrollment, as part of their accountability systems, and we certainly like to see any federal engagement in accountability systems to continue to encourage states to adopt college and career readiness indicators for, for accountability. We'd also like to see that that existing federal funds are made available to dual and concurrent enrollment programs in early college high schools. We know there's no magic pot of gold at the end of the rainbow at the moment in Washington, and so we think there are more ways to encourage these types of programs through existing federal funding streams, such as the teacher incentive programs that would encourage more programs to train more high school teachers to deliver these courses, provide more professional development for college faculty to get engaged in partnerships, and to provide ongoing professional development for those involved in these programs. Likewise, other areas such as science and technology programs and 21st century career training programs are other areas where existing funding streams could be encouraged to be utilized for these purposes. And lastly, just back to if there is going to be any federal investment in accelerated coursework, we believe that they really ought to be available to all forms of accelerated coursework. And so generally speaking, the past investments by the federal government in this have been for low-income student participation. At the moment, there is the accelerated coursework, the advanced placement examination fee program that provides funding to states, and we'd like to see that opened up, as well as any other opportunities that there might be out there for high school improvement and high school transformation that provides funding for low-income students to participate in accelerated coursework. And in closing, I think one of the areas that the federal government can play a key role is to create some clear and consistent definitions. Across the states, there are a wide range of terminology, a wide range of differing terms in use, and this creates a sometimes confusing and difficult situation when those of us who are involved in working across multiple states and multiple institutions get involved in this work. And I think that would help target and prioritize federal involvement in this space by having some clear definitions to guide states and local entities as they continue to deepen these partnerships.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Adam. So we have about 12 minutes, I believe, and so now it's your turn. You've heard from us. What other feedback might you have, questions? We weren't able to go necessarily as deeply as we would have liked, but now it's your turn to contribute.
I'd just like to ask Monique, when you said that was the first set of C's that you had received, what grades were you getting before you got to merit?
I got straight A's. So it was definitely different, but it made me think back on what was the level of expectation, kind of what he was talking about. What were they really expecting from us? And when I think about the assignments that we were getting, as far as, papers. We would write book reports. And, you did well if your paper went on the bulletin board, but your paper went on the bulletin board if you wrote neat. So,
Wow.
right. So if you had the best handwriting, when I was younger, my handwriting was amazing because I wanted to go on a bulletin board. Now it's chicken scratch because I have to write out my notes really fast. But when you think about, these were the things that they wanted us to focus on. And as far as science, because we had fell so far behind, the most important thing was just passing the city and statewide test. And so we would have, I think, about 2 weeks before we were supposed to take those exams, we would just have intensive training on how to pass them and the types of questions that they would ask for those specific subjects. But when it came to the actual subject matter, we didn't know what we were doing. And so when I got to high school, it definitely shed light on that, because when I was doing chemistry and physics and biology, I was seeing things that I had never seen before. It was the complete first time that I was ever exposed to any of this stuff.
Wow. Other questions, comments, feedback? Yes, sir.
Back to you, Monique. So how would you encourage a student who had gotten straight A's and saw that C or a D, and how would you, I often see that too with our students who kind of, that happened to them. I know it motivated you to kind of see what the expectations were, but some of your classmates, what kind of motivated them?
I think just going to the teachers for help was the best thing. Myself and other students who we kind of aligned ourselves with each other because we realized that we were all struggling, and we didn't know if it was just us or if we were kind of thinking how do they expect us to know this stuff? How are we supposed to do this? But then on the other side, there were students who did know things. And so when we would go to the teachers and talk to them, we realized they were just really open to helping us. And one thing that I had spoken to Mr. Weinstein about was there was an abundance of professors. We were 14-year-old students, but our work was being graded by people with PhDs. And so it was a little intimidating because we didn't know, are you grading us like we're 14-year-olds? Remember who we are. But they were, they had certain expectations of us, and they knew that we could meet them. And so one thing that to this day, I'll go to my professors for everything. If I have any questions, if I need any clarification, I'll just always go to them, and they really helped me. He helped me with my writing. He just took me piece by piece and told me which part of my paper had problems. And he didn't mark up my paper like other teachers. They would just, add this word here, this word sounds better, do this. He would say, well, what do you think is better? And so it teaches you how to think. And that's one thing that Bart really stresses, critical thinking. And so it taught me how to make those changes to my paper so that now in law school, my professor told me I got the highest grade in my legal writing class. And that was because I think people, even when they got to law school, they were expecting, add this word here, do this here. And he's not going to do that. He's going to tell you, well, you can make this change. Why don't you try this? And then I would administer those things. And it was that critical thinking that I got from Bard, working closely with those professors who would, kind of guide us and show us what we needed to do so that by the time we were year ones and year twos doing the college program, we had the hang of it and we knew what we were doing.
Terrific. Yes, sir.
For Rachel and Monique, did this program improve your time to degree completion and limit your amount of college costs and debt?
I finished in exactly 4 years, but I think I was required to do 15 credit hours a semester, and I also did a summer, and I had the big difference, I think, between my program and some of the other early college, high schools, and programs that are out there, and they didn't focus on outcomes. So JFF, especially when they implement these programs, are they going to complete the degree? What's the timing? Are they really saving time? Are they saving money? So where I went, and I was actually just telling someone else this, some of the people that I went through the early college program with still aren't done with their bachelor's degree. And I think I'm one of the only ones who actually went in and finished in exactly 4 years. And I did save money. I didn't pay a dime for my first 2 years. And then I went to school in Florida, so I have no undergrad debt. So I'm starting grad school in July, so I'm ready to go into debt now.
Similar for me, Bard was completely free for our first and second year, for the program itself. textbooks. We even for our writing classes, all the books that we read, they gave them to us, so we got to keep them. When I went to college, it wasn't very expensive. I chose the college that I went to because it took all of my credit, so I was able to finish that in 2 years. I ended up doing 2.5 years because I originally wanted to do business administration and realized I hated it. But I ended up doing 2.5 years, and I didn't come out with that much debt at all, which helped when I went to law school, because in law school you take out a whole lot of money. You end up in a lot of debt. But because I had the 2 years for free and then just did the second half at minimal cost, I ended up not going in with very minimal debt to law school.
Let's see a hand up over there. Oh, I thought I did. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
For Rachel, based on your professional experience, what do the secondary and post-secondary institutions, what are they doing well, what are they doing poorly when it comes to letting students move through more quickly?
I think it depends on the program. So when you have a program that has a lot of supports, like the ones that JFF and others support, it's different. When you have a program like mine, there wasn't as many supports as there probably should have been. So in reality, it's not that effective. It takes a highly motivated student like myself. I'm going to go in and I'm going to do it and I'm going to finish in 4 years. And so I think that cost is a huge thing. There's not a lot of supports. I could talk for hours. And then I went on to go to UCF, which is, I think, the second largest school in the nation, and there's a lot of issues with that too. And people don't finish in time for a variety of reasons, and a lot of it has to do with dev ed too. If you go into a college and you're not that good at math, and you can't just go into a college credit math course. You have to take all of these other courses to get you to this course, and it's just such a waste of time. And so I hope that answers your question somehow.
Yes.
You might be able to answer this, Adam, Dr. Weinstein. And I don't really know how to phrase it, but I want to know about attrition. Rachel kind of talked about it, but how do you handle attrition? Is it a problem? What are you thinking?
Well, I think, in our situation, because the BARD programs, everyone goes into the early college program. And so we have 9th and 10th grade as high school classes, and then we don't have high school classes after 10th grade. They're college classes that you're also getting high school credit for. Our retention has been pretty good. In terms of the numbers, some portion of the students who leave because the program was not working for them, and they decided in some sense they decided they wanted to go to regular high school and graduate, which isn't necessarily a terrible outcome. Again, in Newark, high school graduation isn't that high. So if a student says, really, I just would like to go to high school, that might not be a bad thing. That's not a huge percent. Most of our loss was students moving to other districts, which in Newark happens a lot. Often some of our highest performing students, the family decides they're just gonna, usually because they want to move to a safer place. So they move 10 minutes up the road and you're in a different neighborhood in New Jersey. Overall the percentages are pretty good, but I do think there is this balance. There are students where they might have done better at a more traditional high school, though the question is it like what Monique was talking about? Might they have done better and be getting A's somewhere where they would just be grading on neatness? And is that necessarily going to be a better outcome for them? So I don't know that I'm really answering that. I think I'm raising some of the questions in that. It's that thing of like what's a good outcome for a student? To some extent, we'll know if it's a good outcome 30 years from now, and we're trying to back predict what would be the best steps.
So you had freshmen and sophomores, and so if a sophomore left, would you consider taking a new sophomore, or do they have to start as a freshman?
We take a limited number of students farther into the program. A lot of the students who come in partway through will be students new to the district. So when students move into Newark, they have to go somewhere. We've actually had some pretty good success with students coming in that way. It seems like if they start in 10th grade, especially if they did pretty well in 9th grade, that can be enough. The students who start directly into the early college program, we've certainly had some where that was a success, but I do think at that point you're relying more on that individual student's self-motivation, because a lot of the scaffolding we've done in 9th and 10th grade to have them learn how to do analysis and do these things at the high school level before they do at the college level, they won't necessarily have had that opportunity to do. But we do consider students at other age ranges. And I mean, I used to teach at Bard College at Simon's Rock, which is a private early college, which only starts in the early college year. So everyone there has gone to 9th or 10th grade and then somewhere else and decides to start directly into the early college program. So that is certainly a model one could have. I think at that point, you'd want to make sure that the students are really prepared so you're somewhat less able to kind of take a calculated risk on a student who you think 2 years from now will have developed those high school skills.
And I would just quickly add, in the Ohio work that we've done, those 9 early college high schools, the retention rates have been very, very high. But when we ask the students, I think it's been fairly consistent over the years, those who left, the top 3 reasons were, 1, it was just too hard. I didn't have a clue about how hard this was going to be. 2, they wanted to go back to their neighborhood school where they could be with their friends or participate in extracurriculars that may not have been available at the early college high school. And 3, they had to go work. To earn money and to help with the family or whatever. There was just not enough time to do all those things. But it's really about individualized supports and knowing what each child needs and be able to provide the extra interventions that they need. One more question, I think we have time. Were you going to say something, Adam?
Fine.
On that? Okay. We have time for one more question. I think you had your hand up.
I think the sharing so far has not been probably as systematic as it should be. I do think this is something that we should be doing more of. And I will say it's kind of a hard sell. Like I think I was a little naive in thinking, well, I'm someone who came from the college side of things and then gained all this knowledge from my work with high school students. I did a education degree in high school educational leadership and have gone back to colleagues from the college world and said, look at all these things I've learned. And I do get a bit of this look of, right? Like why would we kind of want to learn that? So I think that's something that needs to be more systematic, and we need a larger dialogue on what that is, because I think people get very invested in being a teacher of whatever kind of level it is. But I do think that if we're going to improve our teaching practices, it has to happen from both sides. So I guess the real answer is I haven't really succeeded in doing that yet, but I think that's the next piece. And I feel like having had this experience, I feel really lucky that I ended up learning a whole lot about really, K-12 education at all levels, because I do a lot of, training seminars with principals of K-8 schools. I kind of like to know what it's like to teach first grade now. I mean, I bet that I would learn a lot about first grade teaching that would really help me teach a college class. So, right. And I definitely, thus far, don't think I have any aptitude as a kindergarten teacher, but I'm willing to give it a try. So I hope that we're able to have these kinds of engagements really create that dialogue, because I think that's when we're actually going to solve problems. Once the adults stop blaming each other, maybe the children will actually get what they need.
That's a great way to end. So we thank you, and we conclude this session. Please thank our panelists. And I think our contact information is on the agenda. Feel free to reach out to us, and I encourage you to visit an early college high school that's in your community. Thank you.